Welcome back to another video. Today we have Wilf on with us, and we're gonna take a bit of a deep dive into Wilf's journey as a dropshipper. Many of you have seen Wilf on previous YouTube videos. We did recently do a live webinar where we went through this, and I stupidly forgot to hit record. So this is a bit of a rerun, a bit of a run through of what we went through on that webinar. In a little bit more condensed version. So if you were on the webinar, great. You might not need to watch this, but you're probably still going to be able to pick up some key nuggets. And for anyone that missed the webinar, then this one is for you. So before we kick things off, just a bit of a brief intro into why eBay dropshipping is the best side hustle in 2024. So easiest level or easiest entry level, you don't really need much experience, much cash, or much knowledge of the industry or the business model to actually get started. And having Wilf here, that will just confirm that when we go through and see how he started and how he's getting on. The time commitment, it's fairly low. It can be as time consuming as you want it to be as you scale up, and there's also many ways that you don't need to commit a lot of your time to this. You can easily do it as a side hustle alongside your job, or maybe some other side hustles or hobbies or activities. It does not have to consume all your free time. You get near immediate proof of concept, and this is something that I explained to Wilf way back when he started dropshipping. I was saying way back, it feels like a long time ago, but actually not that long ago, really.
Exactly, yeah.
You can list items, you very, very soon make sales, which gives you that proof of concept. You have unlimited income potential. You can scale this business up. It really just depends on your appetite to scale, where you are in your particular stage of life, and what resources and what time you want to give to the business model. And then lastly, which I think is the most important, it gives you location freedom, which can mean two entirely different things for different people, or many different things for different people. So for me, most of the year round I stay in the UK. I've got a young family, they go to school, my wife goes to work in a job that she likes, but we can also travel around, go on holiday, and I can take this business with me. I can do everything that I need to do remotely, either via a Wi-Fi connection on my laptop or on my phone, or connecting with staff that are working remotely all over the world as well. Or if I decide to, I can go down local cafe, I can sit there, I can do work, I can work from wherever I want to be. I can sit out in the back garden, I can sit in my office, whatever the case may be, I can work on the move. And then other people that I know have left the UK, they've went to live in Bali, Australia, wherever it is in the world that they've decided to move to, and they can take this business model with them. They can just move it and go with them for long extended periods of time, or indefinitely. So, to kick things off then, obviously, like I said, we have spoken to Wilf many a time on the call. We've went through, where he's at, but I want to take a bit of a step back and let's have a look at, how Wilf got involved in dropshipping, and take a sort of run through his journey. So, Wilf, let's get cracking. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you actually got interested in dropshipping?
Absolutely. So here we go. Let me move this a little bit. This is me about a full year ago now. This is before I started working on the social media side with Michael and Craig and all this stuff. I was working on kind of documentary film sets, things like this. And as you can tell by my elated face there, it was pretty tiring work, long hours, capped income, as it says. There's only kind of so many hours you can work in the day. Zero location freedom. You have to be there on set, things like this. And it was not really my dream. I didn't love it. It wasn't what I wanted to do in life. So after some weeks working with Michael and Craig, seeing what they were doing, working on their social media side of things, I started to realize that this is actually a real thing that people do. Michael and Craig are testament to the fact that well, they are owners of the software, but they also they talk the talk and they walk the walk. They do it themselves, and it is a real income that can be made. And that's when I kind of took the plunge and got started around probably 9 months ago now. Is when I got started with dropshipping, and yeah, it's been sunshine and roses since then, pretty much.
Awesome, awesome. I love the way you put that, sunshine and roses. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's always a bit of
there's
rain in
never
between,
problems.
but so I mean, really, the initial attraction was that there wasn't really any kind of initial traction. So most people, see a YouTube video or something like that, and they think it might be something they would be interested in getting into. We kind of found you for something else, and then we kind of thought, well, in order for you to do, what we need you to do, it would be probably worthwhile understanding the business model and learning a bit about it. So it was then because of that, you kind of said, you know what, I'm actually going to start doing this. Can I start doing this? Does that? And I think you said back then as well, he's like, does this actually work? And we were like, yeah, it does work. Because I think even then you were a bit skeptical of like, okay, I'll find out a bit about this stuff and then maybe blag a few videos and, here and there and pretend that I'm doing it sort of thing. And we were like, no, it does actually work and kind of give you the whole kind of 9 yards in terms of, what you need to do and how you need to get started. So I think you'd said as well, you had looked at in the past of other kind of business models like Shopify, dropshipping and things like that. And obviously, I think back then what had put you off was the sort of the barrier to entry, having to have a bit more capital and things like that. So obviously we could get you started in dropshipping, and it was a relatively, I would imagine, well, I say this all the time, it's a relatively risk free kind of side hustle. Like if you don't like it, or it's not for you, it's not like you've poured thousands of pounds into it and then think, yeah, it's not really for me. You can get started relatively nothing, like I say, really low barrier to entry. And if it's not for you, no risk, no loss really. So that's cool. So we always like to talk about the learning curve. So when you started, obviously you had no prior knowledge of this business model. We sort of give you some, like, obviously education. We give you the resources within SaleFreaks. Obviously you have the free training guide, which kind of, I guess you did. You went through that before you decided you would even start dropshipping. So you had sort of some basic education of how to use the platform, and then obviously we started recording the calls. But is there any kind of other education or key resources that you found really useful when you started?
I mean, that first, the free guide that, is, I think it's emailed to you when you sign up for a free trial, everything like that. It's on the website. Everyone can access it. It was really good practical knowledge as well as kind of high-end, like not high-end, like top-level, like business model kind of overview. So you understood the business as well as being able to click the right buttons, right? So it had a good mix of both of those. So I think that was really perfect when I started out, and it was a bit of an eye-opener to how simple it was. And what surprises me is that there isn't tons out there. There isn't loads of content creators and things doing eBay dropshipping. It's kind of, compared to other online side hustles, is slightly under the radar, I'd say, still. It's definitely big in terms of there's a lot of people doing it, but it's for some reason not crazy on social media, which I think is a good sign for a side hustle. It's not ridiculously saturated, so that's something that brought me to it.
Sure, yeah. I think we definitely spoke about this on the live webinar as well, just about the influencers. Then they are just influencers, like these YouTube creators. They're always going to be promoting kind of like the next trending thing, and a lot of people think sort of eBay, Amazon dropshipping's kind of had its day. A lot of the content there at the minute, I'm certainly seeing in my feed, based on what I've watched before, is a lot of print on demand stuff, a lot of Shopify dropshipping, and everything evolves, and there's a lot of these business models as well. I'm not saying that none of them work, for example, but I think, just as we said in the beginning there, this one is certainly I would say, least risk, and probably like least time having to spend actually getting that proof of concept and getting into profit, because I've done the print on demand stuff, and it actually is it's quite difficult to. You have to be very persistent and very kind of into it to actually make it work. And I feel like a lot of the gurus on YouTube tell you that everything's easy and you don't need a lot of money to start everything. I've even seen Amazon FBA gurus telling people that they can start with a couple of £100, and whilst you can, you're really not going to get very far with those kind of budgets and those kind of expectations as well. So no, that's really cool. And if anyone is listening and they haven't downloaded the guide, it is available on the Facebook group. We could even maybe put a link for it in the YouTube video here as well, a link back to the Facebook community. And you can just go on salefreaks.com actually and click into the free course if you're just looking to find out a bit more information about what the software does and how you can get started. And again, cost you nothing, no risk whatsoever. So we've talked a lot about kind of how much time, barrier to entry and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of your daily routine, talk me kind of through your typical day of what you do in terms of what you need to do with your store. How much time sort of did you spend on it in the beginning versus how much time you're kind of spending on it right now, and how that's evolved?
Sure. So between my two stores at the moment, I'm in terms of time on each of those stores, I'd say probably about an hour to an hour and a half, probably at the moment. I do have a VA who's on one of my stores, so that's really helpful. But when you start out, I mean, I'd say you need like 4 or 5 hours to get everything set up. And then it's just a waiting game until your first sale. And it slowly ramps up from then on. So, sale 50 or something. Go ahead.
As a one-off, yeah, those 4 or 5 hours are as a one-off to kind of get you set up. And what I found initially when I started doing dropshipping, I was spending time on it, but actually I was spending a lot of time, refreshing sales charts to see if I got any new sales, or just very much kind of trying to make work for myself, if that makes sense. Whereas I just, after a couple of weeks, you kind of know that you can just let things settle down and only need to deal with them when you need to deal with them. So there's a lot of reactive stuff like customer service that you need to kind of get out of the way and tidy up. You don't want to let that build up. And then there's obviously your proactive stuff that you want to be able to list and add new products and, do your product research and stuff like that. But I suppose, and we'll get on to it, a lot of that stuff actually you kind of skipped by using, the various tools that Sale Freaks has to offer. Yeah. Which I think is great for a beginner, because it also means that you can learn the fundamentals of what you're doing, like the dropshipping side, the eBay customer service side, and then you can actually let the listing side, the product research side, look after itself until you get to a stage where you're happy and comfortable. And then you can start to dive into the product research side, because there is very much two sides to kind of this dropshipping game. There's the business management side of the customer service and all that kind of stuff, and then there's the product research side and the listing items to the store. So you're kind of wearing both hats, realistically. Whereas in a normal business, you would have someone that looks after that, and then you would have someone else that does the purchases or does the product research. So I think it's cool to learn that, and then you can dive into it.
I mean, I think it's also a testament to the business model that in many ways, the more time you put in, the more profit you're going to get out. But there's almost a diminishing return, where if you spend 6 hours every day, like you say, refreshing and finding the perfect product and doing all this stuff, you can sometimes over tinker with things. And eBay don't love that sometimes, and the reason why it is really passive is that it's almost advantageous to leave it and let it do its thing, which is one thing I really love about the whole business model and Sale Freaks and everything.
Yeah, there's 100%. So there's that. You obviously don't need to. You definitely don't want to tinker about with things too much. People panic. They put their prices down, and then they panic again and think, oh, I'm still not making sales. Actually, the more changes and the more mucking around you do, one, you kind of get lost in the sense that you can't remember what changes you've made and when and why, and then
You can't
you
see the
start
effect of
messing
those
around
changes.
again, and then it also, for everything on eBay, you might do something today, but you might not see the effects of that for a week or two. So if you are going to make kind of those knee-jerk changes, like putting your profit margins up, for example, is a big one. People put their profit margins up, sales drop down over the next couple of days, and they automatically panic. But what will actually happen is, in most cases, you might have a little bit of a dip, and then sales will start to come back up again, especially, and we've mentioned it many times before, if you're constantly scaling up, you shouldn't actually see those dips. But the second thing, we mentioned this kind of in the first initial conversation, in terms of, this is still right on the screen, the capped income. So even if you scale, you cannot get to the point, or you shouldn't get to the point with eBay dropshipping where you're putting in like 10, 12 hour, 15-hour days. You are getting to the stage where, I don't spend any more time on my eBay dropshipping than I did 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because once you've actually put in the work and you've scaled, you can then hand off that extra workload as such. And so brings us on to kind of challenges and solutions and things. So one of the challenges, I guess, for you would have been to scale, to get some of that time back. So tell us about kind of any challenges, any bumps along the road, and anything significantly that you came across that you've managed to now overcome for one reason or another.
The schoolboy error is the big one. So I remember me and Michael I think we were about to finish another one of our ride along kind of recorded videos, and Michael spotted that my predicted seller level was below standard. So long story
End of the video, I think.
yeah, he ended the video there. Long story short, I had been cancelling customers' orders for items being out of stock on Amazon, instead of kind of going through a process and consulting with them and seeing what they wanted to do and that kind of thing. eBay do not want out of stock cancellations. That's a really big thing they do not want, and that was upping my defect rate, my transaction defect rate. By that point, my evaluation date for my seller level was pretty close, and I was a bit of a passenger at that point. So I did go below standard for a month. So sales didn't completely die, but it was pretty dreary. And yeah, it was a case of getting on eBay support, getting those things cleared off, and then the next month I was back up to above standard, no issue. So yeah, that was the biggest problem I've had so far. But yeah, all manageable, and it was just knowledge, really. Didn't have the knowledge of it at the time. It was nothing operational that was going wrong. It was just I didn't know, basically. So yeah.
Excellent. I love that phrase, like you were a passenger at that point. I mean, by that, basically there was nothing you could have done to direct that any other way apart from kind of deal with what was in front of you. And I think that's really important in dropshipping in general. And if you're new, or if you're dropshipping for years, I have the same conversation with a lot of people, and that is, all you can do is control what you can control, because there are so many other factors with your suppliers or with eBay or with anything else that you can get so caught up in this kind of, what if, and what if this happens, and what if my buyer says this, and what, forget about all that. Deal with what's in front of you. How are you going to overcome the problem that's in front of you right now? And a lot of that problem can be handed off to someone else to make the decision. So in your case, you were like, okay, this is what's happened. What do I do? Okay, well, I'm going to contact eBay and I'm going to see if I can wriggle my way out of some of these, make some excuses, or whatever, and basically plead to someone else's goodwill that they will reverse that decision. And in a lot of cases that will work, like 99% of the time. Whether it's an issue with your Amazon product, at the end of the day, if you sell something on eBay and they come back and they say the item came broken, well, then all you need to do is direct that problem back to Amazon and tell them the item, put yourself in the buyer's shoes, pretend, that it's you that's bought the product. Well, I get this question a lot. What should I say to Amazon if this happens? And it's like, well, what would you say to Amazon if this happens? If I ordered a parcel off Nike, for example, and I opened the shoebox and there was no shoes in it, what would I say? Well, I'm probably going to go back to Nike and say, I got this parcel and there was nothing in it, you know what I mean? So like a lot of people just get wrapped up in this, what should I do? And it's like, well, what would you do if it was you that was having to deal with it? Because that's essentially all you have to do is put that problem back to someone else and resolve it. So the other problem that a lot of people have, and it goes back to kind of that scale and issue, is, you obviously don't want to give up and trade all your time for that money. And whilst you can scale up, there is only so many hours in the day. So I think at some point you recently hired a virtual assistant, like basically a remote member of staff who does some of your work for you. I don't want to, what have you hired them to do basically, and how easy was that transition for you?
Yeah, I mean, the transition itself was super simple. They're very experienced. They kind of just got on day one and had no issues really. But yeah, they're doing a lot of the day-to-day tasks. They're doing item not received cases. They're doing customer service, everything basically, everything they could do, adding tracking to orders. So yeah, it's completely hands off on my second store, which gives me the kind of freedom to just crack on with my main one, and there's kind of no issues. Yeah, it's been really good so far. I was kind of hesitant because I was not sure if I was going to get all control freaky, but like it is completely perfect. There's no notes so far really. I'd recommend it to anyone who's in a place where it makes profit sense. So you're still, as you say, you have to still be getting paid yourself, which I am, which is all working. So yeah, it's a really good place to be.
100%. Yeah, I'll always say this. It is what people say. When is the right time for me to do X, Y, and Z? And it's like, well, there's no wrong time to hire staff. But if you're not making money and then you're now paying out extra money, well, that's not great, is it? So. You want to make sure that you're buying back some of your time, but it's not costing you money, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So that's coming out of your profits. And I'm sure you'll agree a lot of the time, and this question came up in the call, but when's it a good time to add multiple eBays to your portfolio, add extra eBays and start scaling up? For me, when I was still doing the customer service, I didn't like the idea of having to log into one eBay, log out, make sure that both were covered, and just remembering to cover both stores and stuff. So at that point for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to get a VA. They're going to handle my first store, and then I'm going to focus on building up the second store. But, to answer the question, when's a good time to have a second store, is basically when you've kind of cracked the code of the first one.
Yep.
You're making profit, you understand the business model, you're ready to take to the next step, maybe hire a virtual assistant or remote staff, basically as it's called in some places, and then kick on. So what was your moment where you kind of thought, okay, I'm gonna get a second store, and why was getting a second store important to you? What kind of problems does that solve, or what protection does that give you?
So a really practical point where people can kind of measure against themselves and see if they're at the right point is when you have sales in the day that you're not noticing. So at the start, you're going to hear the eBay ka-ching sound and run to your phone and see what it was and look at how much profit you're going to make on it and all this stuff. When you get to the point where you look back after a day and there's 10 sales that you haven't noticed, that's the point at which where the automation is working, you're probably in profit, you're making money, and that's the point where you want to put your foot on the pedal and scale sideways. So scaling sideways is a good idea for many reasons, but mainly it protects you against suspensions, closures, everything like that. It makes your business more stable, and gives you a good foundation to build upon and scale as you say, sideways and then upwards. If you have one store which has 100,000 listings doing £1 million a day, amazing. You're one suspension away from having £0 a day. So if you have, I mean, I'd rather have 10,000 listings across 5 stores than 15,000 listings on one store, just because of the consistency that will bring, basically. So yeah, that's when you want to scale sideways, and that's why you want to scale sideways.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I've said it that many times that it almost it's like listening to myself. So many times I've said the exact same things, and it just is. It's so true, and it actually took me a hell of a long time to actually get to grips with this whole scaling sideways business, and I think even more so now. I would say that the scaling sideways and upwards is definitely the way to go. For many reasons, but yeah, you mentioned about one suspension away. If you have one store, you're one suspension away from your income being taken away from you, and it doesn't have to be as extreme as that. It might not be a permanent suspension, but if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 stores and you get like a temporary Vero ban, which can happen. It's like for anyone new to dropship doesn't know what a Vero is, it's basically eBay's brand protection kind of rights. If you list something, you get a bit of a slap in the wrist that 7-day ban, 3-day ban, 5-day ban, whatever the case may be. Now, if you get a 7-day or even a 10-day restriction, that could be potentially 25-30% of your month gone. Those and it could be the difference between you making profit and not making profit. So the fact that you're protecting yourself against those kind of things, where basically if you lost the income of one of your stores for a week, you're really not going to feel it that much. You could maybe list a bit more in those other stores to pick up the pace. Or worst case scenario, if you got suspended for some unknown whatever reason eBay suspend you for, or it's a longer restriction where you have to provide documents and it might take you 2-3 weeks to get out of it. Having the protection of those extra stores is awesome. And then obviously with eBay, most people have eBay seller limits, so you're able to list more by moving them across multiple stores. So yeah, absolutely. So success kind of milestones and things like that. I know, like, when I first started, I was kind of my first success milestone for me was, I'm probably a bit like yourself. I just wanted to say, like, the first one for me was like, does this actually work? And then the next minute, the cha-ching goes on your phone and you're like, no, someone bought this from me and I'm going to send it from Amazon. And I remember like sending it out from Amazon and thinking the first thing this buyer is going to come back with is, why is this sent in an Amazon box?
Yep.
I want a refund, this is a scam and all this kind of crap. And then like it doesn't happen, and then suddenly like you start getting these cha-chings every day, and then it's suddenly like twice a day, and then it's 5 times a day, 10 times a day, whatever. And I think like for me, I always laugh about this, like the first time I knew that I was like, this is like could be something, was whenever I turned off the notifications on my eBay app. I was like, I have not listened to this, I don't want to see this anymore. And I actually deleted the app altogether, because I started getting into the situation where I was kind of answering queries like, throughout the day while I was in work, and I probably wasn't giving it the attention that I needed. And then I started to just do it in the evenings for a set period of time where I wasn't getting like, I wasn't rushing something or missing something or opening the message and then not responding. So that was kind of like the first milestone for me. It was like, okay, this is too much, get it off the phone and all the rest of it. But most people kind of think of those monetary milestones. Was there anywhere where you kind of got to where you kind of thought, okay, like this looks like success for me, and kind of what was your initial goal of what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, right at the start, I was really conservative with it, and I was thinking like, okay, if I can make £150 a month, I'll be really happy with that. That's amazing. And then you get to that point, and then you realize there's no reason why you can't carry on. So then you get to 300, then, all right, amazing. If I'm done here, it's amazing. And you go up and up and up to the point I'm at now, where it's like there's no kind of limit in sight. So I'd say in terms of early on goals, I was really, really conservative, because I'd done a few things in the past, like online, how to make money online, all this kind of stuff. As you say, print on demand, things where it is really got to be relentless. So I was like, yeah, let's set the bar low, and if we can overachieve, that'd be great. Yeah, what was the other part of the question there?
Just about sort of where was, where your initial target was, and
Right.
then where you wanted to be, kind of where you kind of wanted to be
Milestones.
after that, like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did throughout the whole process was,
I
let's
suppose,
say,
did you set yourself a target? I think it's targets are really important to kind of drive everything else behind it. If you're working towards a target, you can kind of reverse engineer it from there and say, if I want to make £1,000 a month profit, for example, like, how many sales do I need to have,
yeah,
or how
yeah,
many listings do I have now to make those sales? Did you have like a target after kind of being happy with your initial £100 a month, for example?
yeah. So I mean, once I got to those conservative goals, which I met, I was kind of, I was really happy with it. It was going well for a while. And then I kind of realized this is really, really something, and I set myself the goal of being able to make like a monthly full time minimum wage
Right.
amount of money over the span of a month, just as a kind of safety net, to think like, let's say I didn't work, I'd be fine. So that was another milestone that I set and hit, and I'm so happy with that. Yeah, that's a really big one. So it's kind of more freedom milestones than a certain number, for example.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we'll look at the figures in a minute, but I would say, like, I mean, your best month so far, about 2.5 grand in monthly profit. That is, profit, gross profit. You obviously you have a few bills and bits and pieces to come off the back of that, but largely speaking, I think we spoke about it before. You're still probably netting over £2,000, which
Yeah.
for most people is a pretty decent full time wage, especially if you reverse engineer that and turn that into what your actual hourly output per day,
Hmm.
per month, to actually get that. And I think it's really important as well, when you were making £250 a month or £200 a month, you're certainly not, and I'm assuming this because if you are, you must be doing something really wrong, but at £250 a month profit to now £2,500 of profit, you're not putting in 10 times the work to get 10 times the result, right?
God no. I mean,
Exactly. So this
I'd
is
say it's probably a similar amount.
exactly, and this is kind of the point that I got when I had 10,000 items on eBay compared to having, probably over 100,000 items, more, probably 100, closer to 150,000 items across 10 plus eBay accounts. My daily output is much the same as what it was 5 years ago when I had, one store with, a fraction of the amount of listings on that, just
Mm.
because of automation for a massive part of it, and because of staff as well, obviously, but you know that's how you can get to that level. And I think a lot of people, again, we're talking about milestones, we're talking about how people succeed, and hopefully this inspires people to succeed. But a lot of people, they can see the results quite instantly. They can list some products on their store, and they can see that proof of concept quite quickly, okay, but they hang around with 50, 100 listings, 200 listings, and they get a kind of a month or 2 months in, and they go, okay, I'm making sales, the process works, but I'm actually not making any money. Because initially when you start the business and you're paying for, your free trials expired, your, whatever else, you've started to maybe pay for some product research software, whatever, you're paying for an eBay store potentially. um, they tend to think, okay, the process and the concept works, but I'm not making any money. So they kind of spin their wheels a bit, get stuck in the mud, and then quit eventually. I think the main thing that we have to learn from you, and this is the knowledge that I give you, is that you do have to scale. You have to keep moving and breaking through those ceilings to a point where, yes, you may not make much money. You might make a small loss in the first couple of months just with subscriptions or whatever. But once you break through that, your costs don't scale.
Yes, that's right.
In line with what your profits can.
This is why I love all the auto listers, because they just gently push you the whole time upwards. They kind of break the barriers for you, and you don't even kind of see it happen. That's why I think that the auto listers are super, super useful, because you haven't got to spend the hour a day finding products. You've just listed 50 a day, and it's kind of done 100%. For you. You're automatically progressing.
Yeah, totally, and I wish I had them back when I first started. So I mean, for anyone that's watching this and maybe not using Sale Freaks or not into dropshipping whatsoever, Sale Freaks has the automation where we will find winning products and list them directly onto your store automatically. You don't actually have to do any product research. We base it off our own criteria, and list it directly onto your store, where it has a good potential of success rate basically. And with eBay dropshipping actually as well, is you don't need to be that successful. You of your listings, you really only need to have 10-15% successful, but what you do need to have is consistency and that ability to constantly scale. So we have a number of different auto listers and tools that make that job a lot easier for you. And it was a question that came up in the webinar, and I already know the answer to the question. It might have changed, but up to a point, or what point were you only using auto listers? And if that's changed, when did it change?
I think only up until like a month ago have I really started adding. I mean, I'm not doing detailed product research now. What I'm doing is kind of thinking of product categories, refining a search on Amazon, and then giving the URL to Sale Freaks and letting it list itself. So only up until a month ago, I was basically solely using the Coupon Hunter and the Bestseller Auto Lister. So it's been probably 7-8 months.
Yeah, perfect. So you're using to put it into perspective. Basically, you went into Sale Freaks, in your settings, I want X amount of items listed in my store every single day, and that was it. Set and forget. And then you come back every so often and increase those, or maybe decrease them in times where you wanted to list slightly less, but ultimately always scaling up and always adding more items to your store, which, as you can imagine, eBay being a platform where they're encouraging people to sell products, like you listing more products.
Yep.
Who would have thought? The more sales that you make, the more money that eBay make, and the more items that are available for their customers to buy, the more chance that their customer is going to make a purchase, which is going to make eBay money. So they like to see consistently selling new products, adding new inventory to your store. So I think that's perfect, because you now have the balance of using the auto lister to get what you know that works. You also don't have that unconscious bias of, what would sometimes when you're doing product research manually or doing it yourself, you might think, well, I wouldn't buy that, so I'm not going to list that, or I don't really like that product. Whereas if you kind of just let the software do its work, you see the results. And I'm sure you've seen it. We talked about it on the live, the weird and wonderful products that you sell and you see and you look at and you go, my God, who the hell is buying this? Like, I've had poop and dog calendars, tortoise leads, duck whistles, bacon scented sticky plasters, like all sorts of stuff that, a lot of it you don't know even exists. And if I was sitting doing product research, I would be looking at some of that stuff and thinking, I'm not going to list that, even though the numbers tell me I should. sometimes you have that kind of barrier in your mind. You're like, ah, I'm not going to list that.
One
Whereas with this,
item
you just set and forget.
One item that was doing really well for me for a long time, and I think the Amazon listing, they're no longer selling it, but it was a scratch off map. And I mean, it doesn't seem that crazy, but like it's just something I would never think of to list to my store. And that was bestseller Autolister, and that sold hundreds of times. Just the weird things like that, which you never expect but do so well. And there's even certain brands that seem to do really well. Yeah, not something you can really predict.
100%, and it works the other way as well. I remember like spending hours like looking for a lot of these like trending products and things, and then thinking, why is this not selling? And I'm like, do you know what? Who cares? The reality is, all the best dropshippers and all the biggest stores that I've seen on eBay through research, like most people are only selling 15-20% of their inventory, and that it does boil down to a numbers game. The more that you list, the more sales that you will make, and the more more profit that you'll make as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's have a look at your results here. I mean, we have your sales on two pretty, I would say, pretty well established stores. Now you're doing like 55K in revenue over the last 3 months, which obviously nearly half of that, well, like 40% of that's probably just come from the last 30 days. So you can see
Yeah.
that there's like that nice upward trajectory. Month on month, things are doing really well. The second one obviously has had a bit of a drop off. Sometimes that happens. The more you start doing this, the more you start kind of zooming out. Every day you're looking at it, and then you start to look at it maybe once a week, and then after a while you'll start to know what's a good month and what's a bad month, rather
Yep.
than a good and a bad day. So it's really, really, really impressive to do £55,000 worth of sales. Is huge. I mean, I probably never did 50. I mean, I sold on eBay for 20 years about 15 years before I started doing dropshipping, selling various stuff. I probably never sold that amount of volume in the 15 years on and off selling on eBay. And the fact that you're kind of just firing random products up from Autolisters and making all these sales, I still find it pretty amazing that like how well it works.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Just crazy.
So, what's your kind of what's the future plans? What's your plans for? Was there any moment where it clicked for you and you actually? Because I tell this to people a lot, like more listings, more stores. Was there any point where you kind of it clicked for you and you thought like this totally makes sense to me, and why it made sense to you?
Even when I first heard about it from you guys, eBay dropshipping, like Amazon to eBay dropshipping, from like the kind of hyped up Shopify dropshipping, become a millionaire in a week YouTube videos that you sometimes see,
Yeah.
the fact that it wasn't really glamorous and flashy made me think that it was really viable. That was kind of moment one. And then there's a plethora of moments after that where, first sale, first £100 sales day, first £500 profit month, things like this that come along the way. But there's been no specific moment where I was like floored and sat there thinking, oh my goodness, this is it. It was kind of just reassured to me over time of starting it and doing it. Up until now is kind of how we got there. But yeah, as someone who was very skeptical of everything like this before and has now actually done it start to finish and is completely online, no kind of manual labor when it comes to this, I can't recommend it enough to anyone really.
And what would your advice be to someone who's just starting out in dropshipping and would look at this video and want to replicate your success? If you throw up your the next slide, which shows kind of where you're at. So this shows Will's profitability from the Sale Freaks dashboard. It is gross profit. He'll have to pay his staff out of this and pay for software and any other kind of business expenses that he wants to include within this business. But if we have a look at it from day one, 7.5 grand, £7,651 in total profit that he's earned in the 8/9 months since started. And basically you could basically take out month 1, 2, and 3 really from that. It's going to be a very low amount. So basically in the last sort of 6-ish months, he's earned, over 7.5 grand, to the point where the last 31 days just under 2.5 grand. So if someone's looking at this and going, okay, I want to replicate that. And I remember looking at someone similar to yourself, say when I first started drop shipping, and I was watching one of these videos, and what I actually thought at that time, and I can't remember the amount or whatever it was, but I looked at it and I thought, if I could do half as well as this person that I'm watching, so if I was watching you and I would say, right, like if I was making 1,200 quid a month, I'd be happy. So what advice would you give to someone like that would be watching this video thinking kind of that same thing? What's the kind of best advice you can give them starting off?
I would say find a daily routine of tasks that keeps your account in good standing and lists items every day. Find whatever that is for you. It looks really different for different people. Find that and just relentlessly do it every day. If you make £10 in a day, do it the same as if you were going to make £100 in a day. Keep consistency, and the number one thing is just to list every day. List every day and always remain scaling, and the results will kind of just speak for themselves. They'll arrive on their own, really.
Gotcha.
Consistency.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I'll start off with this. So when I joined Sale Freaks, I started off, like I did it the other way around, right? That most people do it. When I started Sale Freaks, I started with a 10k package with the view that I was going to fill that very quickly. Now I came from, I was using another software. I stopped drop shipping very briefly over the kind of the Christmas period, and thought I'll come back to it in the new year. And I came back to it and took it a 10k package, and my view was, if I don't use this, I'm going to be losing money basically. So I kind of went all in. Most people start off and they take the lowest package and then they move up.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing to consider is, yes, I do own Sale Freaks now, but I started off as a user, and I've been a user longer than like the owner of Sale Freaks. So yes, there is a business sense that I will, to scale up through plans. Obviously Sale Freaks makes money, but as a drop shipper and as a person that is teaching people how to drop ship, you cannot not go through the gears. If you think about it, driving a car, you're not going to drive around in first gear all the time. You don't want to cruise up through the gears, and it's exactly the same with anyone that is drop shipping. Was there any point, Wilf, that you kind of thought, this doesn't make sense for me to keep like pushing through the next package? Because you're going from 500 beginner package, which is £29, and then, for example, I don't know, like a 5,000 item package might be, I don't know what it is, I think it's £200 or something like that. £200, $200. Was there any point where you went, I'm not sure about this, or were you just kind of kicking through it as soon as you got to the limit, are you just moving up?
I mean, I think there was a point, where I was like a 1,500 listings, where I was thinking, I'm really happy with the money I'm making now, and I think I even slowed down my Autolisters and tried to focus on making it perfectly consistent and everything going really, really consistently. And it just wasn't. Firstly, there was no reason for it. I wasn't being limited by anything, and it actually didn't stay consistent. I mean, in terms of eBay, if you're walking, you're going backwards. You got to keep kind of jogging and keep the pace up the whole way. So I'd say there was a time where I did kind of want to, just because I thought it would be a good idea, but it turned out that even I think sales dropped slightly, just because I didn't stop listing, I just slowed the listings down and things like that, where I think it just makes sense from so many different angles to keep listing and to keep it kind of accelerating.
It's a very good point, and we'll not get into kind of all the technicalities behind it, but I see that a lot actually with people. Even they maybe get to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 upwards listings, and they're getting great sales, and then they just stop. Because they're happy with where they're at. Let's say they're making good money, they're comfortable with the amount of time they're spending, but then they stop doing all the things that got them there in the first place. They stop listing items, and listing items is the main key factor. So you can still get to a point where you're keeping everything, like you can't, there is a point where your eBay limits won't allow you, or you're just comfortable with where you're at, but there's still maintenance to be done. Like, you still have to remove dead items and list fresh items to keep things fresh with eBay. You can't just get to 5,000 items. Okay, I'm doing great, I'm making £1,000 a month, and then a couple of months later you're kind of scratching your head thinking, why am I still not making the same amount of sales? And it's because the nature of the business as well. There's going to be a lot of people sniping your listings. There's going to be people listing the same listings as you. So you've always got to keep moving. You're gonna, if you're doing well over the first 6 months of the year, and then stop doing anything, a lot of your items are not going to be even relevant in the final 6 months of the year, whatever. So there's a lot of that comes into it. So you've got to be either constantly scaling, or you've at least got to be maintaining. You've got to keep what you have and keep moving with the times. That could be moving your profits down at the right time, moving your margins up at the right time, and all these things. So thanks for sharing your insights, mate. Obviously this is round 2 and the second run through. But yeah, I think it's really, really beneficial for people. I think it's quite inspirational. If I was watching this, I would certainly think, okay, this is definitely achievable. So to summarize, Wilf came in, he had zero dropshipping knowledge, didn't even fully believe that the business model worked until we kind of had to reassure him. Got started with nothing, with no knowledge, and I think I said this on the live call. It kind of, we were doing bits and pieces, and I think you came to me and I was like, oh, are you still actually doing this? And you're like, yeah, I'm doing really well. And I was like, oh, because like you'll often speak to people quite a lot at the start, and then they'll go quiet, and usually one or two things happens, and it'll be oh, it didn't work out for me, or I quit, or I wasn't doing this, or it'll be like a complete success story. It'll be like, no, I'm like absolutely killing it. So what I would say is, as well, if you get started and you're maybe struggling to understand stuff, we do have monthly calls where we do kind of group coaching sessions. They ask me anything on the end of the call. We're always willing to help. We're always looking to try and guide people in the best way possible. So with eBay dropshipping, yes, you do have to give it a little bit of time, and you do have to scale. There are a lot of elements to it, but you will get the reward. So if anyone is watching this and inspired by Wilf, take the plunge. The worst thing you can do is just keep sitting back and doing nothing. Take action, get involved. There's plenty of resources to learn. I can't wait to see where you are in the next 6 months, man. I think you're going to be even bigger and better. Do you plan to add a 3rd store, 4th store? What's kind of your future?
Definitely. I'm working out the best way of doing that. The most efficient and safe way from an eBay standpoint. But yeah, definitely looking to go for a 3rd and definitely a 4th in the end. But yeah, that's the future. That's what I'm looking forward to, scaling sideways even further.
Amazing, buddy. Amazing. That's it. Make hay while the sun shines.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time once again, and thanks for anyone that's tuned in and watched the video. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Catch you on the next one.